Two U.S. officials with direct knowledge tell NBC News that briefing materials prepared for the president-elect himself included information making damaging allegations about his dealings with Russians. BuzzFeed publishing a dossier sourced to a person who claims to be a former member of British intelligence. Inside the pages are claims that the Russian government has been cultivating, supporting, and assisting the president-elect for 5 years, even gaining compromising information about him in an effort to blackmail him.
It claims that Donald Trump once visited Russia, stayed in the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow, and then hired prostitutes to perform a golden shower.
We already know that the part about the coverage that they have on him with sex actions is supposed to be true.
Whoever paid for it has corroborated a lot of the information that was in there to begin with.
NBC News has confirmed reporting by the Washington Post that the Clinton campaign and the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, helped fund that research that ultimately produced the now infamous dossier on Donald Trump.
This was the Republicans' baby, and they funded it. An unknown Republican donor funded this dossier. And then, after Donald Trump won the nomination, Democrats picked it up.
The conservative website, the Washington Free Beacon, funded the original Fusion GPS research into Donald Trump.
The Washington Free Beacon said tonight it has approached the House Intelligence Committee to answer questions about the money the conservative news outlet paid to the firm Fusion GPS in 2015 and 2016 for the purpose of conducting research into the life of then-candidate Donald Trump. All of the work that Fusion GPS provided to the Free Beacon was based on public sources, and none of the work product that the Free Beacon received appears in the Steele dossier, said Free Beacon founders and editors Matt Continetti and Michael Goldfarb. The Free Beacon had no knowledge of or connection to the Steele dossier, did not pay for the dossier, and never had contact with, knowledge of, or provided payment for any work performed by Christopher Steele.
The law firm Perkins Coie, which represented the Clinton campaign and the DNC, retained Fusion GPS in April of 2016 to conduct opposition research.
Now, the Steele dossier was compiled for Fusion GPS by this man, former British spy Christopher Steele, whose research into Mr. Trump in 2016 reportedly included interviews with top Russian spies and diplomats. The Steele dossier brimmed with highly salacious rumors about Mr. Trump, but its contents went unverified, even as the dossier landed in the hands of U.S. lawmakers, the FBI, and various news outlets. BuzzFeed published the contents en toto in January. The Washington Post disclosed last week that the Steele dossier was bankrolled by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. So what apparently began as a Republican-funded effort to discredit Mr. Trump on the basis of publicly available sources ended early in 2016, was picked up by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, and became an effort to unearth private information from Moscow. All of this is significant, of course, because for more than a year, leading Democrats have alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin, and the special counsel's probe has been examining that allegation. The disclosures about the funding of the Steele dossier suggest it was the Democrats seeking to benefit from Russian intervention.
We now know that the Clinton campaign, the DNC, paid over $9 million to help fund these lies, this propaganda hit piece that the Russian government sources gave them.
Correct. And, this is a standard practice of all campaigns, including the, Republican campaigns.
It wouldn't be a surprise to anyone that the DNC and the Clinton campaign were funding this. It contained allegations about their opponent in this.
Donald Trump Jr. takes one meeting a year and a half ago that resulted in nothing. He came on the front page then of Time magazine with the word traitor. They called him a traitor for nearly a month straight. He had to then testify many times in front of senators in a closed session. And now you have all these new developments that Hillary Clinton actually sold out something of value for $110 million to her foundation. She says, oh, I knew nothing about that.
This is how opposition research works.
This story is not about opposition research.
That dossier, which is totally fake and made up, it's like a novel, but that dossier is a disgrace and it should not have been allowed to be used.
Maggie Haberman, she tweeted, quote, folks involved in funding this lied about it and with sanctimony for a year.
Your team paying for this opposition research, and Donald Trump's people working with the Russians to influence the election. Is there a difference?
Of course there is. And, you know, I think most serious people understand that. This was research started by a Republican donor during the Republican primary. And then when Trump got the nomination for the Republican Party, the people doing it came to my campaign lawyer and said, you know, would you like us to continue it?
Right.
And he said yes.
There is a difference between her paying for the dossier and Trump-Russia so-called collusion, but not in the way she means. What she did appears to have been a crime. It's a crime to give money to a foreign national in a political campaign. That's what she did. It's not a crime for Donald Trump Jr. to talk to a Russian lawyer or George Papadopoulos to talk to a Russian during the campaign.
This is the difference. This isn't, oh, I've got information, do you want to hear it? This is, I'm paying for the false information.
Right. It's the exchange of money that the law prohibits.
Should the Democrats have come clean on this months ago?
Well, you know, truly, Chris, it's op research. It's what any campaign engages in.
No, but should they have come clean during this massive investigation with all the focus on the Russian connection of Donald Trump? Why wouldn't the Democrats come out and say, okay, we paid for it, instead of letting it leak out now when it now brings into question the whole effort? Why weren't they clean? Why did they hide this? Why did Hillary Clinton hide this?
Well, I don't know that Hillary Clinton hid it, or was it just her attorney who was thinking of it?
Look at the writing yesterday by Molly Hemingway at The Federalist. How many stories are out there in the media that came from Fusion GPS? This isn't just the only story. They were working hand in glove with the liberal media. Your audience needs to know that Fusion GPS was making stuff up about President Trump and feeding it to other journalists.
Do you believe anything about that dossier?
Oh, I think it should be taken a look at. I think they should really read it, understand it, analyze it.
What I have learned, or I've heard about the dossier, it's about his involvement with women. It's about possibly prostitutes that are involved in those kinds of things.
No, it's about Hillary and the DNC paying for Russian lies, and you in the media, and you in politics, and the Democratic Party then spreading lies.
The only reason we have Mueller investigating the president today is why? Because James Comey briefed the dossier to the president, and within minutes that was leaked to CNN.
Meanwhile, new information shows the FBI used a controversial dossier of alleged contacts between President Trump and Russian agents as evidence for a secret surveillance warrant.
Right now, we have to have the AG cancel Mueller's mandate because the dossier was full of Russian propaganda from Russian agents and was fallacious. It was a lie.
All right.
Mueller is culpable.
But you think Mueller is culpable?
Yes, without a doubt.
He knew?
Without a doubt.
He had to know.
And
Eric Holder knew. And Eric Holder signed off on the deal.
He had to know that this was a bogus dossier. He had to know it because he knew the sources. Secondly, why was he paying Michael Steele? Why was the FBI paying Michael Steele?
for the phony dossier, the propaganda, the misinformation, and the lies that were fed to the American people that were tried to be used, the Russian phony dossier, to influence an election.
As someone who worked in law enforcement for over 3 decades, what they have done is stunning. If this Trump dossier is the basis of FISA warrants and the unmasking of Americans and was used knowingly, funded by the Clinton campaign, and Jim Comey is the guy who goes out when it's not his job, Tom, and makes a decision that he's going to exonerate Hillary, I mean, then the whole criminal justice system falls on its head.
You can't pay millions of dollars to foreign nationals because that's against the federal election laws you can see there. And you can't hide it by filing false or misleading reports. Now, I've been hearing Democrats say, oh, those are just civil penalties. They are not. The government produces a book. It's 319 pages outlining the federal election laws and all those who have been criminally prosecuted and ended up in prison.
There's James Comey using that disinformation to create a special prosecutor trigger that is used to investigate the president.
If, in fact, the dossier was the basis upon which a FISA warrant was issued, you're talking about a whole host of legal issues that Greg will have to do another chart, because you're talking about going to a court, which is a FISA court is a court, and getting a warrant to basically eavesdrop, tap, listen in on conversations based on a document that was not only unverified, as James Comey said, by the way, and salacious and unverified, his own words, but ask this question. Why was the FBI considering paying for it at some point in this process?
Now, there's also another major component to this story we cannot discount. The FBI, the Department of Justice, have not been cooperating with congressional Republicans in their attempts to find out more information about this fake news dossier and the group that is behind it, Fusion GPS.
The Democrats clearly wanted this information coming from the intelligence community. If people believed that it was coming from Democratic sources, and Mark Elias was definitely behind this, we've confirmed, it wouldn't look as good.
Now, when the New York Times starts literally calling Clinton's team liars, you know it's bad.
The Democrats have been fighting us every step of the way to find out who paid for the dossier and whether or not it was relied upon. Yesterday, they went 15 years back in time to talk about apartment leases and bank loans, but they're not interested in who paid for the dossier and whether or not it was relied upon. So I'll be back this morning in a skiff on the Russia investigation trying to get answers.
What is so damaging here is that people's faith in our top law enforcement agencies, like the FBI, it's totally undercut when they behave this way.
I want to know whether the nation's premier law enforcement agency relied on a document that looks like the National Enquirer prepared it.
Well, can you answer that question today? Did the FBI rely on it or not?
You know, Bill, I think I can, but I want to be able to prove it.
To the extent the FBI and Justice Department used this dossier as a pretext to spy on President Trump's team or President Trump himself, this is much more significant government scandal in terms of the Obama administration, the Justice Department, and the FBI than, frankly, anything Hillary Clinton did.
Think about this. I was a former federal investigator. This is not a joke now. You had bogus, spurious information, potentially fed from the Russians, into our FBI that was used in a presidential daily brief. The president was briefed on fake Russian information.
Under the supervision of the National Intelligence Director, James Clapper, while briefed by the FBI Director, James Comey. I think you should be aware of this. There might be some leverage used against you once you assume office.
And I'll take this to the second point here, too. You're right. If this information was used, God forbid, in a judicial document to get a warrant to tap anyone or on the Trump campaign, you want to hear about a scandal? The FBI used fake Russian intel potentially?